My experiences with homosexuality has been very skewed, to say the least. When I was 11, I witnessed a toxic lesbian relationship, and they would yell, argue, bicker. And being 11 and not great at math, I didn't think, wow, these two people have really poor communication skills. No, I figured the relationship was that way because it was gay, which in itself doesn't make any sense because I've seen straight people act the same way. Nevertheless, I had a very negative and weirder association with LGBT people because of that. What made it worse was that I was starting to suspect, more so fear, that you know the homophobic dog meme? That whole pipeline? Yeah, that was basically me. I thought that I was a deplorable person for it. And it got worse when later in life I became Catholic. I wasn't baptized Catholic though, because I always had like a weird feeling about it. I mean, I see why now. But now, not only I believed I was a deplorable person for being a little, now I believe that I was a deranged sinner who was always gonna be bad and wasn't worthy of good things because of this. You know, not the shitty beliefs I had about other, entire groups of people, but because of this. TLDR, gay Christians be like. Okay, being honest, I think God cares more about someone's character rather than if they're the picture perfect, westernized, Puritan Christian. And yes, I acknowledge that a fuck ton of Catholics and other Christians alike aren't even a hard stance on homosexuality to the point of like accepting it. But I mean, you gotta remember, I'm referring to the extremes here. Extremes I had belief in. Clearly the beliefs and ideas I had about the gays were super fucking tone deaf, despite the video being titled Understanding Homosexuality. So imagine this video being actually understanding homosexuality, but with so many more layers. In hindsight, I wish I had just never brought up the topic or never mentioned it or said anything about it, right? Because I had to do a whole fucking lot of corrections now. Alright, so one of the things I mentioned was someone became because their parents weren't there for them, didn't give them love and affection, right? Which on surface level, okay, homos come from bad parents, therefore homos are bad, but let's focus a bit on that parent bit. Trying really hard to TLDR, the long version of this script, how masculinity and femininity has been viewed and dealt with has led to dysfunction within the home and society. Men, or just people in general who have a strong sense of masculinity, never have to tell you about it or try to prove it to you. Stoicism has been highly praised by men as being some sort of staple in masculinity, but the very men who attempt to replicate how a Stoic acts, they always fuck it up. A lot of Stoics can't even be proper Stoics. That's the image in my head. Confusing self-control with self-suppression has led to a generational occurrence of some men acting like neurotic crybabies. Okay, it seems like it's a lot more than some, but we have to remember that these men are often the loudest in the groups. Due to their incessant complaining about women in the world around them being the cause of all their problems, and, totally not because they act like a bunch of petty Regina Georges with a mommy complex. With these men simply existing, it sets a really bad example of how, a real man acts or how masculinity is supposed to be presented. And it's caused a ripple effect in media and other things we consume. So when these set of individuals try to raise a child by withholding emotion and presence, it could create some issues. These issues even affecting stud and butch lesbians, because where would they derive this idea of masculinity? Masculinity being as fragile as it has been for a long time, it's bound to affect how femininity is viewed as well. Being reduced to nothing but overly emotional and irrational all the time, I mean, how do you think this dynamic in the household is gonna work? This sort of Peter Pan syndrome when it comes to emotional maturity is horrible for raising kids. How are these older gen parents fine with hitting literal children, but they gasp at the idea of being confrontational to someone their own age? A lot of this again is due to emotional immaturity, and yeah, that could apply to politics pretty well. If there's any men or anyone else watching, obviously, If anyone gives you shit for being emotional, they don't give a fuck about you, bro. Any man, woman, third option, fourth option that doesn't want to be an option, fifth option that's okay with being an option, but they just prefer if it wasn't anything specific. Who says that to you to invalidate how you're feeling, doesn't care about you, and you're better off just not listening to them and focusing on yourself. I know this sounds like a tangent, but when you realize just how long people thought this to be a viable system in the first place, you realize just how fucked generations become when they bury that shit down and repeat that bullshit to their kids. What do you think happens when you're raised in a household like that?
The kid becomes gay.
Now hold on, homo, that just goes into mommy and daddy issues, and that can affect anyone. And that can bring a variety of issues alongside homosexuality, not homosexuality itself being the issue though. Mommy and daddy issues place toxic traits into your sexuality, but they don't entirely define it. There's a plethora of things that could determine the aspects of your sexuality. Neurodivergency being common in the LGBT community might make sense. I mean, how long have we only considered the sexuality of neurotypicals?
Even then, sexuality isn't just who you fuck. It's an all-encompassing word that includes physical and emotional attraction.
And some could argue that some heterosexual men are only sexually attracted to women and not so much emotionally. I wonder if that's why there's plenty of closeted men who live as typical straight husbands, but they secretly fuck men on the down low because maybe they're more emotionally connected to them. Same could probably go for straight women who suddenly become bisexual when they get a bit of alcohol in their system. I mean, hell, sexuality being as convoluted as it is, how many aromantic men and women are out there? You may be sexually attracted to a man or woman, or insert previous joke here, but can you emotionally connect with them? Especially in a healthy way. What I'm saying is, sexuality is unironically a spectrum. There's a joke about bi women who only date studs and butches, about how they're basically still straight because of how masculine studs and butches tend to be. But what if we were to apply that to men who were attracted to masculine women? I'm not implying that one is straight and the other is gay. What I'm saying is that straightness and gayness has never been black and white, and human sexuality has never been black and white. There's a lot of nuance in the conversation of human sexuality, and I probably won't even catch all those nuances due to brevity and just not knowing niggas like that. To have a healthy relationship, you need to have emotional attraction, or it just ends up being friends with benefits, or, you know, parents who haven't divorced yet because they're waiting until, you know, you move out to pull the plug. Even if people became gay because they lived under shitty parenting conditions, which I don't even think is the 100% of it, because living in an environment like that could only really exacerbate certain aspects of your sexuality and turn them toxic. Also, it's hard to attribute all aspects of your sexuality to just one source. What's the bigger problem? A gay son? Or emotional immaturity causing so many of the problems in platonic and romantic relationships? It's easier to say, look at all these whiny gay people, there's something wrong with gay people, instead of, holy shit, how can we deal with this generational problem of belittling and talking down on emotions, something that's innately human? Yeah, obviously it's easier to talk shit on the first one, but if you don't pay attention to the second one and, you know, resolve that, I mean, hypothetically you should end up in the same result, right?
Okay, Gabby, I get it. Let's just have non-mentally ill people have children, so then generational curses don't.
Nope, that's eugenics.
Fuck!
Also, that really fuck with low-income communities, since low-income homes increases the chances of developing a mental illness.
Please stop, please. This is so hard. How do we solve the problem without solving the problem?
We stop ignoring it, and we stop going after people who likely live in the same conditions as us. It's clear this conversation of homosexuality delves into a lot of other topics. The topic of whether sexuality should be taught to children only really comes to two conclusions. Either we teach kids about the different types of sexuality, or I don't know, we just don't. I mean, what kid is genuinely concerned about sexuality in the first place, right? Which sounds great for people who don't want homosexuality taught in schools, but I'm referring to heterosexuality too. Is it not forcing sexuality when parents are constantly asking their child, you have a boyfriend or girlfriend yet? Or when we have to do that Romeo and Juliet play script in class? Or when they imply that a platonic friend of a child is more than just a friend? Or calling their son a lady killer, or telling their daughter that the boys could be all over them when she gets older?
Gabby, are you implying that setting expectations for your child's sexuality is actually horrible for their self-esteem when they likely don't hit those expectations?
Yeah, and I understand that, a lot of parents probably don't do it with malintention, and that can go for gender as well, but that's the next video. We shouldn't be sexuality checking children like, nigga, I'm 6. Why are you teasing me about being friends with a guy? The fuck that guy do with anything, bro? Like, just let these kids become who they want to become. Like, they know life better than us, yeah? But it's unrealistic to ask heterosexuality to be hidden or not shown to kids because that shit's all over the place. But I can't help but apply that to homosexuality as well. Something like that just gets dehumanized and demonized, like the average homo is out to get you and turn you gay. Which is true, actually. And besides, school is supposed to help you prepare for the world and shit, right? White gays with the same haircut since 2008 are a part of this world. But then again, could we really trust schools to properly teach sexuality? I mean, hell, the probability of your child being verbally or sexually abused by a fucking teacher is there. I want kids to learn about the world they live in and how they navigate it, but the school system is straight up ass! How many times can we give millions to schools only for them to use that money to redecorate the main office the 3rd time in 5 fucking years, or to buy a second new car? I think sexuality should be taught, but honestly, we gotta reform like the schools and make sure that the money goes towards the kids' education and not fucking embezzlement. I can't pretend that these issues are easy to resolve. Something like sexuality should be not fucking demonized and actually treated with actual care. Kids are gonna learn about it one way or another. I'd prefer if the way they learned about it wasn't through inaccurate internet memes or being victimized by an adult or a 20-year-old Minecraft YouTuber. Did I put that? I put the same thing twice in the script. And no, it's impossible to prevent a growing teen to be interested in what sex is. It's best to be open with them about it and tell them what sex is about and what person can genuinely learn and grasp the concept of things through fear-mongering, right? Also, tell them all about consent, because I'll be damned if—
Wait, Gabby, why would kids even be interested in sex? It's yucky.
They're interested in sex and learning about it due to just curiosity. They don't realize that something like sex isn't to be glorified, but they don't know better. Kids want to be a part of the performance of sexuality. I mean, not in like a super sexualized way, of course. I just mean doing little things like hand holding and hugging. But if left poorly educated and just generally naive, it creates this weird phenomenon where they think that if you've had sex before, it makes you more mature, more like an adult. This becomes a very toxic mentality when young straight men think the amount of women you've had sex with matters more than having a genuine connection with that woman. Which, again, translates to women in a very demeaning way. The less times a woman has had sex, the more value she has because she has self-respect. I say this in quotes because it's usually bitchless men or very slutty men who fuck the whole block who say hypocritical shit like this. I think it's pretty obvious in the ways sexuality has become commodified and demonized. Here's my take on this. Sex has value, hold on, but it doesn't give or take away any value from anyone.
Okay. What about gay pedophile?
So, the stat about pedophiles about 30 years ago, 30% of them being homosexuals. When you misinterpret this stat, it has the implication that homosexuality is some sort of pedo factor. Well, that's not really the case at all. Let's take a quick history lesson, shall we? Ancient Rome, but the homosexual part of ancient Rome. People unknowingly point to this as a way of showing that homosexuality's been around for a long time, which is true. It's nothing new by any stretch of the imagination, but the homosexuality in Rome was actually just men abusing their power over other men. More specifically, male slaves, male prostitutes, and male children. Homosexuality in Rome was less about the webtoon gay romance ads you keep seeing. It was more about men showing their dominance and proving their status, aka rape. Something like rape and pedophilia is a clear abuse of power dynamics and should not be conflated with any sort of sexuality, including homosexuality. We can see this in the modern day with prison rape. Just because a man or woman rapes someone of the same sex doesn't necessarily mean that they're gay. As weird as it seems, it really is just a show of dominance, and don't worry, I apply the same logic to heterosexuality as well. Because when you rape, molest, or sexually harm someone, you're actively dehumanizing them and are not expressing sexuality. You are exercising abuse upon another person. Easy to agree with, no? So going back to the 30% stat, being a homosexual obviously doesn't increase your chances of being a pedophile, and neither does being a man, obviously. Before we get to abuse, I should explain how the stat is. When it comes to that stat, I just want to add this in here real quick. What they were talking about was, this is what they were looking at. Okay, how much abuse occurred, right? And, you know, just looking at the stats of it all and stuff. 70% of it being a pedophilia, you know, abuse of the opposite gender. Usually men, right? Usually men being the ones who are the pedophiles in this study, right? Doing this to little girls, right? Pedophilia of the, you know, different gender. That's what they mean by heterosexual, of the different gender, right? Now, when they say homosexual, what they're referring to is same sex, clearly, obviously, making this very obvious. A man doing this to a little boy, pedophilia, right? These are both pedophilia. This is about pedophiles. This is not about sexuality. This is not about, oh, but I'm a gay person. It looks like the numbers are disproportionate. Maybe that means I'm more likely to be a pedophile. Obviously not. What they're saying is the actions that were committed by these pedophiles were either of the different sex or the same sex, right? That's what it's referring to. And if we look at prison rape, obviously it's not a bunch of fucking gay people going to prison. I mean, come on. Statistically speaking, there's not that many fucking gay people, okay? And a lot of them aren't in fucking jail. It's a bunch of, you know, normally heterosexual, you know, whatever, doing same-sex rape, right? So when you put these ideas together, pedophilia is not a sexuality and not to be conflated with any other sexuality. Crazy, right? Crazy. So I had to quickly explain that, because I think I forgot to explain that part in the script, because, you know, this whole part's about the fucking stat, right? My apologies. But I hope you understand now that just because you do something to someone of the same sex, when it comes to rape, abuse, molestation, doesn't even mean you're gay or you're straight. It means you have psychological problems and you're a pedophile. Holy shit. I had to explain that because I know someone probably would have gotten confused if I just didn't explain that real quick. I know abuse can sometimes lead to the victim of abuse becoming an abuser themselves, but there's such a fucking stigma around that the people who think that homosexuality can only come out of abuse think that these homosexuals are just gonna go out and abuse people now. I know this is gonna be really hard to grasp, but hey, ever think that not all, you know, abusers or even victims of abuse themselves? Like, really, how many times in shows and movies have we seen the tragic villain backstory? Imagine this. We make an irredeemable villain, but halfway through the show, we reveal that they were abused as a kid. Ah, boom, baby, that's a hit maker. Ah, the audience is gonna love this. Another sympathetic villain. They haven't seen this shit 1,000 times. It characterizes victims of abuse very poorly. There's no wonder why stories that handle the topic of abuse always do it so badly. You have to wonder if the person who made the story even considered what an abuse victim goes through. Fuck! You don't just get abused and then boom, you become a monster. There's a lot more nuance to it, and I hate that this fear of abuse victims has led to homosexuals, children in orphanages, and abuse victims to being stigmatized to hell for the abuse they went through. And that's just if the only way a gay person can be gay is if they went through abuse. So why would you degrade and mock people that you viewed as victims of abuse? Oh shit. I did that. I know this topic of this old ass 30% stat delves into different discussions, but you have to realize so many of the implications behind misinterpreting the stats like this. I recognize that normal people don't conflate homosexuality with pedophilia and then go on to demonize gay people. But again, I'm talking about the depths of political schizo hell that I was in, that even schizophrenics don't get to. Pedophilia is such a loaded topic, but so is human sexuality, and it's not good to strip the nuance out of topics like these. And I see that now. I think the headache that was induced from trying to understand shit as complicated as this has definitely taught me that. At this point, I'm not only sorry for expressing and spreading disingenuous, fucked up views on these people, but I'm also sorry to myself because I fucked up such a big and serious topic for the sake of wanting to seem smart or something, being in the closet. Fuck, man, I don't know. It's stupid to think about in hindsight. It is. Because if I was really going to critique homosexuality, I should have just shut the fuck up, or at least tried to understand human sexuality at that point. Like I said, there is a lot of nuance in this discussion about heterosexuality and masculinity and femininity. Why didn't I think this level of trying to understand sexuality and how we got here didn't apply to homosexuality? I know there's issues within the LGBT community, whether it be with mental health or just agreeing on which of the hundreds of labels applies to someone. I know the label thing is made fun of, but come on. Let's not act like there's so many fucking labels in politics that you have to start Google searching what all those damn words mean. Non-members of a community are gonna have a hard time trying to talk about the issues within that community because they simply aren't a part of it and can't understand it as well. So when some straight, usually right-leaning person attempts to talk about LGBT people having an issue with HIV, not only will LGBT people not really listen to this person, but the person will shine light on that issue, often with the intention of spreading a certain agenda. The agenda usually being that gay people are just degenerates who simply don't care about their own health. The problem with the contraction of HIV is due to not being that well educated about it, lack of testing for it, how to avoid it, etc. And talking down on people who have caught HIV isn't gonna fucking help the issue. I understand that some people who point out the HIV thing might have good intentions, but unironically with the stigma around the LGBT community, those good intentions often end up in poor execution and like more hatred. But here's the thing, sometimes non-members of a community would rather listen to a fellow non-member so that person can translate, per se, to someone who's an outsider of the community. That doesn't sound that bad until you realize that that is the reason why certain agendas get pushed and people who are actually dealing with the issue being discussed simply don't get listened to. Which, I know, that's a lot of social politics in a nutshell. But I strongly speculate this is why so much bullshit gets skewed about certain groups of people by a group of people who only took the word of someone who didn't understand what the fuck they were talking about in the first place. Guess what? That's what I did in my video, Understanding Homosexuality. I spread bullshit about a group of people I didn't even try to take the time to actually understand. And I ended up pushing negative beliefs about them. And I apologize for that. The next video is gonna be about transphobia. I think that one's just gonna be shorter because I'm just not that well knowledgeable on like gender stuff, but I'll try my best.
Trans rights.